Today I just want to explicitly explain the client-side usage of JavaScript. So this is the most common usage why we use JavaScript on the client side. First is to do DOM manipulation. I'll explain what this means. And also you can use JavaScript to call remote services or a remote web API from JavaScript. And finally, just give you an overview of this jQuery, which is a library that you can use. Although it was very, very popular, but now kind of it's not that popular anymore. I'm just adding it here for your reference. I don't recommend using it. I recommend using the plain JavaScript, not using this library. But because it is still widely used for old projects, it's good to be familiar with it, but please don't use it for new ones. Okay, so this is the first. So first, let us revise what we can do with JavaScript. So far, you already have seen you can use JavaScript on the server side to build the application logic, and that's what you have been using Node.js. On this client side, there are many scenarios where you can use JavaScript. First, you can use it to react to user input. Whenever the user clicks a button or selects an element in a drop-down, you can react and do some event handling. So you have seen this already. When I select, let's say, a student from a list, the student details get displayed. So this is an example. You can use it to update the page. So you have a page and you can add some more elements of the page at runtime. You can use it to validate form input. So you have some inputs in a form and you can validate, let's say, the age should be from 1 to 18, for example. So you can validate this. You can perform some computations, sorting, animation. All this you can do using JavaScript. And finally, you can use it to make an asynchronous call to web API. If you have some web API running on another server, you can call it remotely using JavaScript. So I will show you all of this, but before you go into the details, you must be familiar with what you can do with it, and then learn how you can do all this stuff. Okay, first of all, where we can put the JavaScript on the client side. So typically we put it in a script tag in the head of the HTML page. Of course, you can put the JavaScript itself inside the script tag, but that's not recommended. The best way is to put it in a separate file, typically with the extension .js, and then you import it into your page. So the way you import it, you create a script tag, and the source will be the file where you place your JavaScript. So this is the most common way of doing it. Now, so the role of JavaScript is to manipulate what is known as the DOM, the Document Object Model. So the story of this DOM is that when the page comes from the server to the client, in which format does it come to the client, to the browser? JSON. Sorry? JSON? No, not really. Usually it's HTML. Yeah, it can be JSON, yes. But in most pages are HTML pages. For JSON, we use it for web API. So remember, we have two major type of resources on the web. We have web pages. This is usually for human users. And we have web API. We have discussed this. So in web API, yes, we return JSON when we send JSON to the server. But for web pages, we receive HTML. And this HTML is nothing but text. So the first thing the browser does when it receives this HTML, it converts it to a tree structure, a tree data structure. And what we call this tree data structure? A DOM, Document Object Model. And what JavaScript allows us to do, it allows us to manipulate this DOM. What I mean by manipulate, what do we mean here by manipulate the DOM? I can hide some elements, I can show some elements, I can remove elements from the page, I can add elements to the page using JavaScript. So basically the page becomes a tree, and the JavaScript allows me to program this tree. I can add, remove, show, hide, and so on. I can also use JavaScript, go to the server side, get some JSON, use that JSON to add some elements to the page. So this is the big picture of how JavaScript fits. So this is the main thing. Also, I can use JavaScript to listen to some events. Let's say I have a button here, I can listen to the click event and do some action when that click event happens. Okay, so here's how this DOM tree looks like. So first we have the window, so the DOM, every browser knows, like basically every browser, when it gets the HTML page, it converts it to a tree. And then I can use this tree to select elements on the page. I can add, update, remove page elements. I can apply styles, and I can listen and handle events. That's how. So if I have an HTML page, I have the head, the body, and then let's say in the body I have a div. You know, it's a tree structure, nested elements. So let me just show you this practically. Let's just take this as an example. If I go here and inspect, you will see, if I go to, you can already see even the browser kind of knows that this is kind of a tree structure. So the root of this tree is HTML, and then we have the head and then the body. Within the head, I can drill down and get style, I can get any elements within the head. And within the body, I can also drill down and see. You see here, there is a header, there is a div, and there is a footer. So basically, it is represented, the page is represented as a tree. I can use JavaScript to access these elements from the tree. So that's basically the basic idea of JavaScript on the client side, is to access those elements on the page and do something with them. So I'll show you some examples shortly, so the idea will become much clearer. But so first, every element on the page becomes an element in the DOM. And these elements, they have properties that you can read and write. Some of them are read-write, some of them are read-only. For example, here I have an element of type image. So this element has tag name, which is image. So the tag name of this element is image. This is a read-only. You cannot change the tag of an element. There is a source. This is basically the image that will be displayed in this tag. This is a read-write. You can change it dynamically at runtime. And I'll show you some examples shortly. This is an ID. So every element, you can give it an ID. Why do we give IDs to elements on the page? So you can access them through JavaScript. So in the basic idea in JavaScript, first you select some elements, one or many, and then you apply some action to them. Let's say remove them, hide them, change their color, whatever you want to do with them. So in here, this is an example. In here I go to DOM. So the DOM that I just explained, it's accessible through a built-in object called document. So every page at the end of the day on the browser, it becomes a document. And then in here, what I'm saying, I'm asking, using JavaScript, asking the browser, please go and get me this element called icon 01, which is basically this element with the ID icon 01. And all I'm doing here, I'm changing the source from being an octopus to a KT.gif. So the image that was shown in this element will be changed. And I'll show you some concrete examples shortly. So the basic idea of JavaScript on the client side, you go to the DOM and you select one or many elements and you apply some action to them. Or you change a property of the element. In here, which property I'm changing? The source. And this will change the picture or the image. The image element is showing. So the first thing we ask ourselves, how can we select elements from the page? Because before I can apply anything, some action to the page elements, I have to first select it. Yeah? So same, like I showed you this when we covered the CSS, if you remember. Before I can apply some style to an element, what should I do to that element? Select it. I select it, then I apply some action. So let me just show you. In general, just to show you the idea, to remind you of the idea. So let's say I have some text here, and I want to apply some style. Let's say I want to make this bold. So first thing is, first I have to select what the part of the page that I want, or the document that I want to change the style, and then I can apply whatever style I wish. That's basically the basic idea. Yeah? So first select, then apply. So same thing here with JavaScript. I need to select, then do some action with that element. So one way to do it is to use this query selector method. So the document object has this query selector, and I give it here what I want to select from the page. So in here, I am selecting, what I'm selecting here? Yeah, the first paragraph. If I put query selector, I'm selecting the first paragraph on the document. If I want to select all the paragraphs, I do query selector all. Okay? Now, what you put here is similar to what you put in CSS. If you remember, you can apply style to a particular element by ID. You can define a class, and you can apply. You see here, for example, here I am selecting the first paragraph. In here, I'm selecting an element that has this ID. The ID is equal ID. In here, I'm selecting the first element where the class name is whatever the class name might be. In here, I'm basically selecting images where the source equal cat. So any image that has source equal cat will be selected. So basically, this is how I select elements, using either query selector, if I am interested to select the first one, or query selector all, if I want to select all of them. So for example, if I want to select all the paragraphs, I want to change their color, or I want to hide them, or increase their font, whatever I want to do, I can do query selector all. Okay. And there are plenty of examples in here you can explore. So this is the recommended way of selecting elements from the page. Now, there is an older way of doing it. You might come across it, but I recommend not to use it. But remember, the DOM follows a standard. So all the browsers out there, they implement the same DOM API, the same way you manipulate the DOM in Firefox, in Explorer, in Chrome is the same. So, and of course, this DOM evolves. Every time they add some new things, they make it better. So the latest way of selecting elements is using the query selector. And the good thing is, the way you select elements is the same way you do it in CSS. But if you want, you can use the old API. In here, I'm saying go and select the elements by ID. And I select an element that has this particular ID. Here I say select element by name. And here selecting, let's say, paragraphs or divs or images, whatever I want. And here it will return me many elements. In here it will return only one, but in here it will return many. And I can select elements by tag name. Oh, sorry. This is not correct. Yep. This one will return many, but this one will also return one. Because in here, basically, I'm either selecting by ID or by name. You know how elements, you can give it an ID or you can give it a name. In JavaScript, the most common way to refer to a particular element is by ID. So you go to the element and have an attribute ID and you give it a name that you wish. In here I'm selecting elements by tag name. It could be image, it could be paragraph, div, whatever you want. So instead of learning many APIs, get elements by ID, by name, by tag name, so many of them, it's better to just learn one, which is the get query selector, much more powerful. One method you can do all what these three methods are doing. So that's why it's better to just learn one API and use it. Sorry, you learn one, this one. You learn one API and you use it. But if I'm only including this because you might find it in some old JavaScript. Okay. Now, once you select elements, you can do a lot of interesting things. So let me see here what's going on. So in here, maybe best is to show you. So let me show you an example what I mean by DOM manipulation, or what interesting things I can implement using these basic techniques that I just discussed. So let me show you this, and then I explain what's going on. Okay. So basically here I have an image and I have a button. So here is the lamp and there is a button. When I click this one, it will turn on. In this turn on, what did I do? How did I implement this? I changed the image, yes. And also after I changed the image, can you see the button went from turn on to turn off? Have a look at this. When I click again, what will happen? The image will change and the text or the layout of the text of this button will also change. So it will change to off. So the image will be off and the button is on. So this is an example of manipulation of the DOM element. So let me show you how this is implemented. Okay. So first, this is only for demonstration purposes. I am putting my JavaScript in the page. But usually I should put it outside and then kind of import it using the source here, okay? And put the file name there. But for demonstration purposes, I want to put all in one page. But this is not good in practice. So first, this is my page, very, very simple page. What I have here, I have an image tag, and I am putting the bulb of image. And the height is 300 pixels. And then I put in a button, and in this button, the value is turn on the light. So far clear? Okay, so what I'm doing here, remember, one of the things I can do with JavaScript, I can listen to events and react to them, do some action when the event happens. So first, what I'm doing here, I am listening to the DOM content loaded event. This is very, very important. So when the page loads, it takes a bit of time for the browser to convert the page into DOM. and to show it on the page. So I cannot access any of this stuff until the DOM is ready. The DOM is ready. So if I just put my code without first the page is fully loaded, then maybe I'll be accessing some stuff that doesn't exist yet. So I have to wait until the browser is ready, the page is ready, then I can start programming against it, and I can start manipulating the page or changing the page. So that's why you will find this very, very common, that you put your JavaScript in inside this event. Is clear the idea of this event? So I'll wait, and I basically listen to this event. What is the name of the event? DOM content loaded. When this event will happen? Sorry? Yes, when the content is fully downloaded from the server to the cloud, and when the text is converted to the DOM. Yes. So when it comes here as text, as HTML text, and basically it gets converted to a DOM. So I cannot just start immediately playing and programming this DOM. I have to wait until the browser does this part, until the page is fully downloaded and the DOM is created. So that's what this event is doing. So I listen to this event. When this event happens, I run this function. Okay? Now, I listen to another event. What I'm doing here, have a look at this. I am going to this button. So I'll go and say, can you see here? Query selector, button switch, which is basically here is the button that I want to select. And then I listen to this event. I start listening, which event I'm interested in? The click event. So when the click event happens, what I will do? Change the image. So first, I'll go and select the image. Here is the image. What's the name of it? Bulk image. So I go and select it, and then I do a switch. I do here an if statement. If this means, you know, here, this add event listener, this refers to the button that was the source of the event. The button in this case is this button. Okay? So what I'm doing, I'm saying if the value of this button is turn on the light, meaning the user is asking me to turn on the light. So to turn on the light, all I'm doing, I change the source to this bulb on image. And of course, I change the value of the button from on to off. Else, I do the other way. So I change the source to off, and I change the button value to on. That's it. Very simple script. Allows me to do this. And this is a very good example of DOM manipulation. Is clear? This pattern is very, very common. I listen until the content is fully loaded. Then I start listening to events that are of interest to me. So I'm not interested if somebody clicks here or clicks in it or types something. I'm not interested in any of this. I am only interested which event I'm interested in only when somebody clicks this button. So I'll go to this button and say, when you are clicked, here is what you should do. In this case, what I'm doing when this is clicked, changing the image and changing the value. And then when it's clicked again, change the image, change the value. That's it. That's basically a good example of DOM manipulation.
What is the difference between this and what we used to do, like rendering the content according to the click?
Sorry, can you say again?
What is the difference between this and what we what we used to do?
Okay. A different context. What I want to say here is I'm showing you what you can do with JavaScript on the client side. Another scenario or another common ways of using JavaScript on the client side is that I can, for example, maybe if I understood you, what you are referring to is, let's say you have a drop-down of students. I listen to the change event. When the selection changed, I go to the server, grab the details of that student, and then inject it on the page. Yes, of course, that's another use case or another scenario where you can use JavaScript. But this is a different scenario. So in here, what this example shows you, it shows you using JavaScript to do what is known as DOM manipulation. Manipulation means here I change the image and I change the value dynamically at runtime. So without JavaScript, this page will be static. It will not change. But with some little JavaScript, I'm able to do it. There is some change on the page dynamically. I didn't go back to the server. It's just all on the client side. Is the idea clear? Yes, there are many scenarios of using JavaScript, as I explained here. As I explained, this is the most common ways of using JavaScript. I react to user event. I reacted to the user event. User input. I reacted when the user clicked the button. I did some change to the page. Updating the page, I updated the page by changing the image. I didn't do this. These are other scenarios, validating the inputs. For example, remember here, in your project, you will have some validation. Number of homeworks is maximum 8. So you will do this validation using JavaScript. Perform computations. I might do some small calculations. I'll show you an example shortly. Or I can, the example you're referring to, I can go back to the server, get some more data, and update the page. Yeah. So these are the most common usage of JavaScript on the client side. Okay, so, yes, please. I already posted what you need to do.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the exam?
Sunday, tomorrow. I already emailed you, didn't I?
No.
Tomorrow is the lab
I already emailed you before the break. Definitely, I can show you the email. So the exam for the lab is tomorrow, and the theory is. Sorry? Definitely, there is an email.
I'll check the email.
No problem. I'll show you. Let's just continue. After the class, come and see me. I'll show you the email. Yeah. Yes, please.
Just one question. Can we use our own laptops in the lab exam?
Yes, of course. Yeah. You can use whatever. Your laptop, the lab is up to you. Yeah. Everything is open.
The same
Except the
content
task.
of the last email, the same content?
Same content. Okay. All right. So there are some common properties that you might, when you are developing with JavaScript, you might access some common properties that, for example, the value. We already used it here in this example. So in this example, I access the value element. The value property of an element. So another thing you might access is the inner HTML. So you can come to a div or a paragraph and change the HTML inside it. So value is usually used with inputs. But inner HTML, let's say this is a div, I can come and change its inner HTML. Or I can change the class name. You remember the CSS class name? I can change it to be a different class name. So I can change the style at a runtime by using the class name. Now, every element has so many properties and events that you can listen to. So let me show you. So if I come to this element here, inspect, go to properties. So here is the element. There are so many of them. One of them could be source. Of course, no one knows all those elements at one go. So let me see here. There's an inner HTML, for example. There is ID element. Source, can somebody see source? SRC. Okay. Maybe under HTML element. Okay. All right. What I want to show you here is that there are so many properties and events associated with every element. You are not kind of required to know all of them. The most common ones is value, inner text, class name. But if you want to discover more, you can use something like the inspector that comes with most browsers, and you can have a look at the properties associated with every element. You can also have a look at the events. The different events that are associated with an element. So in here, for example, on show, on stalled, on submit, there are so many events associated with every element. So we don't need to know all of them, but you need to know the most common ones. And the more advanced ones, you might come across them as you build more experience. Now, for event handling, there are two ways to handle events in JavaScript. One way, you can come to the element itself and put the event name and put equal and put the function that will be called. This is very straightforward. Come to the element, put the event name you are interested in, equals some function called. So when this event happens, this will be called. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, I can go and select the element using JavaScript and then add event listener. So when I add the event listener, I put which event I'm interested in. Is it click? Is it on mouse move? Is it on key down or key up? On many events, and which event, which function I want to call when this event happens. So two ways of doing it. In here, your HTML is aware of your JavaScript. That's the problem with this way. In here, your HTML does not know that it is using JavaScript. JavaScript will, in the kind of outside the HTML page, will grab the element and listen to the event. So this one and this one are exactly the same. So this is the preferred way because your HTML does not have any reference to JavaScript. But this one is a bit more work, but more elegant way of doing it. So two ways that you need to be familiar with. So this is an example. So I have here. Yeah, so when the button date is clicked, I will go and display the date. This is an example. We also seen other examples with the example I just showed you. So in the example I just showed you, here. So another way of doing it, I could come here and put on click. You see here there are so many other events that I can handle, but the one I'm interested in is on click, and I can put here the function name that will be called. But I decided not to do it that way. Instead, I did it all from JavaScript. So I selected the element and then added an event listener. So these are the two ways of adding JavaScript to your. Okay, now these are the most common DOM events. So on click, on mouse down, or mouse up, on key up, key down, on focus, on scroll. For the forms, this is the most useful one, on submit. So when the form is submitted, there is an on submit event that gets raised. And you can put your validation here in this event if you wish. This event, I already explained it, is very, very important event. Before you can do anything with the DOM, you have to wait until the DOM content is loaded. So most people will put their JavaScript inside this event. So to make sure that the page is fully loaded before you start playing with it. Okay. So other things you can do with JavaScript, you can add new elements. So here is an example of adding an element. So in here I'm creating a new element called div, new div, and I am setting its text and changing its style, and then adding it to the body of the page. So here's an example of adding freshly created elements at one time. Now I can also select particular elements, and I can go and ask for its parent node or children node if I wish. So I can add elements, I can traverse, go from one element to its parent, from one element to go to the children if I want to. I can also hide and show elements. So in here I'm selecting this my div and going to style display none. That element will be hidden. If I want to bring it back and show it again, all I do is style.display empty string, and that element will show up again. So I can show and hide using this. So these are the most common manipulations or common used methods. I can add elements, traverse the DOM, or show and hide elements. Okay, last thing I want to show you is the fetch. You already seen it. We already discussed it. So the fetch allows me to call the web API remotely. So the way I use it, very simple. So for example, here I am asking to get a particular student. So I create the URL, go to API/student/particular student ID, and then I say fetch and give it the URL. Now fetch is an asynchronous call, so I have to put here a wait. As soon as I put a wait, this function becomes asynchronous. And then I wait for this response to come, and then I wait and get the JSON from the response. So this is one way of using the fetch for getting data from a remote web API. So fetch can also be used to post. So if I just use fetch, by default, fetch will use get as an HTTP verb. But I can use fetch for post. So the way I use it with post is a bit more complicated. So in here, I am grabbing the email and grabbing the password from the page and assigning them to these two variables. And then I'm calling the fetch function. I give it the URL, so I want this fetch to call this /login. This time I don't want to use get, I want to use post. So I put a method with post. The headers, this is just to tell the server side, by the way, I can accept from you JSON, and I'm sending you a JSON document. And then in the body, I am sending this email and password as JSON object. So this is how post will look like. Okay. So fetch is used to read and write using web API. Now this one, I only put it for your own reference. I don't recommend it. Whatever I just explained, you can use it. You can, instead of using plain JavaScript, you can use jQuery. But again, I don't recommend it. So here is an example. So I can do here query. I'm sorry. That's it. I will let you go. I can just do here, instead of doing query selector, I can put $, instead of using the query selector. And